Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
This program is suitable for general viewing.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is Friday, the 8th of September, and we kicked off this week with a monumental event, the African Climate Summit at the KICC, which captured global attention. The summit brought together leaders, experts, and advocates for climate action. And today, as we unravel the social dimensions of climate change, joining me in studio will be Phoebe Shikuku, the Regional Coordinator, Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Action from the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, as well as Peter Murgo, the Disaster Risk Reduction Manager from the Kenya Red Cross. And also joining me for that conversation will be Ahmed Dur Bashir, the COO of the Kesho Alliance. It's a very interesting conversation lined up for you. But first, let's give you the headlines.
Yes, it is true. We contributed the least. Yes, it is also true. We are suffering the most. But in this crisis is Africa's opportunity.
Climate action. African leaders to lead the way in championing climate action for sustainable growth.
Nimetolewa, uvimbe ulikuwa mgongoni. Na kweli nashukuru Mungu kwa kuwa kweli nimetolewa na sasa nitafanya kazi zangu ambazo sikuwa naweza kufanya.
Healed at last. We tell you the story of Lucy Wamboi, who underwent surgery to remove a hunchback during a medical camp in Namanga.
Allah has divided the community in such a way that those who have, their test is that are they going to give to those who don't have? And those who don't have, their test is that are they going to be patient?
Helping Hand, religious institutions leading the way in charity works that transforms lives and elevate poverty.
My name is Nadia Osman and my sign language interpreter is Ilhan Noor. Now, African heads of state and government have agreed to lead the way in finding sustainable solutions to the climate crisis. The leaders observed that climate change and Africa's development are tightly tied and cannot be ignored. They expressed their intention to collaborate with developed nations while also reminding them of their climate action commitments.
They made the remarks on Tuesday during the Africa Climate Summit at the Kenyatta International Convention Center in Nairobi. President Ruto said Africa has made a conscious decision to be at the core of the solution to the climate change problem.
I proudly celebrate the courage and imagination with which the people of Africa and their leaders have converged with extraordinary focus and commitment on the climate agenda, not as an additional or peripheral concern for public policy, but as the foremost priority and the defining intervention in our collective journey to shared prosperity.
He said overcoming the challenge will require concerted efforts from all players and nations.
Yes, it is true. We contributed the least. Yes, it is also true. We are suffering the most. But in this crisis is Africa's opportunity. And that is what we want to focus on. Africa's opportunity to unlock the tremendous resources that we have for green energy transition.
President Kagame said it was time to take a decisive action aimed at curtailing climate change.
Africa continues to carry the burden of rising temperatures, despite contributing the smallest share of global greenhouse gas emissions. We cannot just keep talking about it without doing what is required to fix the problem. This is unfair, but in the long run, playing the blame game is not the answer. A more pragmatic approach is for Africa to be a key player in the search for global climate solutions.
At the same time, President Ruto called for more equitable international financial system to lessen Africa's debt burden.
There was a phrase that Kaigai Kobarin Besen Kosir Kobarin Banan. I will explain to you what that means. There is Besen and there is Banan. Besen is debt. Banan is poverty. So it is said in this community, if you must die, it is better to die of debt than to die of poverty. Because you are dying anyway. So and so, to contextualize that into this debate, we don't want to die in this continent, we don't want to die of debt, but we also don't want to die of poverty. That is why we must have a conversation around multilateral development banks and concessional financing and how we can finance our economies using resources that do not punish us.
He said financial framework will promote economic stability and help address the climate change crisis.
The stakes are high and actions have to take place not tomorrow, but today and literally now. As Africans, we have no choice but to seize the moment to capitalize on its potential to offer solutions to green growth and decarbonization, and while creating resilience to our communities and economies. We can no longer afford to address economic development, climate change, and African poverty burden in isolation. The interplay between development and climate change is undeniable, and this interlink demand integrated and coherent solution that will provide opportunity for socio-economic development of Africa.
For the Muslim Insight, I am Aban Shehemi.
Thank you so much for that, Aban. Very wise words coming from African leaders. Now, still on the climate change conversation, President William Ruto has challenged the youth to assume their rightful position in the climate change conversation. The president said the youth are so powerful that their voice can no longer be left at the periphery. The head of state observed that there were observed plans to incorporate a youth representative into the African Union.
I am also encouraged that the young people of our continent are stepping forward boldly to say we don't want to be bystanders. We do not want to be attendees of conferences and ushers in places. We want to participate. We have ideas. We have suggestions. We have positions that we can, perspectives that we can present on the one single challenge that faces humanity and that threatens our future. And the young people being the greatest stakeholders of that future, you are rightly in place to make suggestions about this existential threat that affects not just our present, but also threatens our future, where you are the greatest stakeholders.
Very empowering words from our president. Now, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua on Monday said Kenya is working on partnering with the United Arab Emirates to bolster school meals programs in the country in a bid to increase the number of children benefiting from the program. Speaking when he hosted UAE Minister for Environment and Climate Change Mariam Al-Mahiri at Harambee House Annex, the Deputy President said the two countries enjoy strong ties and Kenya is looking to work with the UAE to expand the school feeding initiatives.
The Deputy President highlighted that Kenya is following in the steps of other countries like United Arab Emirates that have successfully rolled out school feeding programs.
We have just come out of the worst drought in 40 years after 5 failed successful seasons. And as a result, millions of children are out there not going to school. And we have tried and it is working in areas where we have school meals program. The enrollment in the school is very high and the retention rate, the children stick in school. So we really want you to intercede for us with your government to be our advocate and see whatever support you can give to this country in that program. And it's well laid out in the concept note that we sent through diplomatic channels. And we trust that in keeping to our traditional friendship, the United Arab Emirates will hold our hand and assist us in that aspect.
He said that Kenya remains committed to scaling up the number of school children under the program from the current 1.8 million to 10 million by the year 2030.
Matter security and defense, we are having very good cooperation in terms of combating terrorism and making sure that our young people are not radicalized. And that is why our school meals program is very important for us, because when these children don't go to school, they become easy prey to be recruited into terrorism groups.
He said the programs will play a key role in increasing the number of learners in school and improving their retention in the learning institutions. In June this year, President William Ruto launched the Nairobi County School Feeding Program at Roysambu Primary School grounds, where he said 5 billion Kenya shillings will be used to implement the program.
Katika budget yetu tumeweka bilioni 5 ya chakula ya watoto shuleni. Watoto wengi, mimi nimetembea sehemu nyingi ya Kenya. Watoto wengi wanakosekana shuleni kwa sababu nyumbani hakuna chakula. Mahali tumepeleka chakula shuleni, watoto wameongezeka 150-200%. Kumaanisha kuna watoto wengi hawasomi. Shida yao ni chakula.
Reporting for Muslim Insight, my name is Mariam Musa.
Thank you for that report, Mariam. Now moving on, Muslim Education and Welfare Association and the Street Families Rehabilitation Trust Fund in Mombasa County are transforming the lives of street families through the rescue, rehabilitation, reintegration and resocializing programs. Speaking to the Muslim Insight, Said Muhammad, the Mewa Street Family Coordinator, said for the past 3 years, the Mewa Street Family Program has touched the lives of over 350 beneficiaries. It said the program was a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but has since gone to become a comprehensive program aimed at addressing the issues facing street families.
Mewa as an organization has been in partnership with the Street Family Rehabilitation Trust Fund since 2020 till to date, 2023, where we embarked on a pilot program in responding to COVID pandemic in 2020, where we were able to intervene in the issues of the people who are living on the streets. We started as a pilot program and eventually we grew until now we are working for the 5th cycle with the Street Family Secretariat, which is under the Ministry of Labor and Social Securities. Mombasa as a county has been having a problem or underlying issue of the people living on the streets. So through our research and a need assessment that has been conducted in previous cycles, we felt there was need for us to decongest our streets of Mombasa. And this has happened in several phases where we were able to identify different problem statement from each and every cycle. For our first cycle, we did it as a holistic program where we were just responding to the pandemic and making people getting out of the streets. But we identified a lot of underlying issue, particularly naming some of the few health issues, education issues, addiction issues. We had to identify first, how can we get these street children back or this street family back to their society with little stigma and discrimination from their societies, because most of the people who are living on the streets are stigmatized by the society by being labeled names. So the process of integration most of the time is not easy, because we need to identify the clients and make sure that they go through a system of treatment. The street family program has 4 pillars, where basically we work on the rescue, rehabilitation, reintegration, and finally resocialization. And the 5th pillar, which is the most common and the most critical, we call it the prevention. So we have the 5P in the program. So we have a lot of prevention programs that we are working to make sure that those who have beneficiary are not going back to the streets.
Thank you for that. Now, the Kenya Muslim Women Welfare Association has launched an initiative aimed at empowering women through education as a step towards generations of Muslim women in Kenya have the opportunity to reach their full potential. The non-profit organization, with the aim of supporting and educating orphans, widows and revert girls and women, held a fundraising ceremony on Sunday where Sheikh Nurdin Khishki, a prominent scholar based in Tanzania, said it was time to ensure assistance reaches the brothers and sisters who revert to Islam and go through different challenges.
According to Sheikh Kishki, the 100 Kenya shilling weekly challenge and Build Your Mother a House in Jannah seek to collect funds that will be used to build a masjid and other facilities that will enable women empowerment.
Kwa kweli nataka niambie jamii nzima kwa ujumla, mambo ya kheri hayaendi bila ya mali, na hata dini pia kuna sehemu lazima utahitaji mali. Vipi utaweza kuswali bila kujenga msikiti? Na vipi utajenga msikiti bila ya mali? Kwa hiyo mambo kama haya ni mambo muhimu sana. Jamii ya Kiislamu na ya Kikenya na iasa na naiomba hasa tuwe na tabia ya kujitolea kihali na mali.
In an interview with Muslim Insight, the chairlady and founder of Kenya Muslim Women's Welfare Association, Mariam Ahmed, emphasized the need for more educational opportunities for Muslim girls.
Lengo langu la kuanzisha hiki chama cha Kenya Muslim ni kuweka wamama wote pamoja. Na wamama wenyewe wajua kuna mama wengi walikuwa wameslimishwa, wamewachwa, wengine pia hata si Waislamu. Kama huyu Sheikh Kishka ametoka Tanzania na ametoka kwa ajili yetu. Hiyo lazima tujivunie na tushukuru. Na tumshukuru Mwenyezi Mungu ambaye ametufikisha mpaka sasa, ametupa nguvu, ametupa afya kufanya hivyo.
The 86-year-old said lack of education is one of the main factor hindering the empowerment of Muslim women, and the weekly donation of 100 shilling to support the project will help and support Muslim women and girls. Her sentiments were echoed by Ahmed Ruto, a volunteer at the event.
Katika shughuli ya leo tulikuwa tumealika takriban watu 400, lakini walilahi alhamd tumepata takriban watu 350. Tumelaunch mchango ya kuweza kumtolea mama yako, umjengee janna kwa kumtolea 100 kila wiki, tukijumulisha pledges na cash yote kwa ujumla ni 3 au 3,552,320 shillings.
Jamia Mosque Nairobi Director of Information Sheikh Juma Amir emphasized the women's role in society, stating the importance of education in the community.
Namba ni kubwa ya waliojiunga na wala tulizochanga hazitoshi. Tunataka tuenda kuzungumza habari ya nafasi nyingine tena ya kuchanga na kuwashirikisha Waislamu wengi zaidi kutoa zaidi. Manake huu ni mchango wa maisha yao, Hatujui atakayekufa miaka 100 ni nani. Hatujui ambaye tunakwenda kuwapangia awezaye kufanya biashara apewe, awezaye kufanya lolote ile ambalo waweza kufanya asaidiwe, bora tuishi vizuri.
Kenya Muslim Women's Welfare Association vision is to see women in Kenya become self-reliant and empowered to contribute to the development of their communities. Reporting for Muslim Insight, my name is Abdurrahman Gaddafi Yasin.
Thank you for that report, Gaddafi. Now, in a remarkable humanitarian initiative, Al Khair Foundation, in collaboration with various organizations, including Healing Lives Foundation, organized a free medical camp in Mailitisa, Namanga, Kajiado County. The free medical camp aimed at providing essential healthcare services to underprivileged community members unable to afford medical care. The two-day free medical camp offered services ranging from minor surgeries, gynecology consultations, and dental care. Lucy Wamboi, a beneficiary of the medical camp, tells us her story after undergoing surgery to remove a hunchback that has been hindering her daily activities.
Mimi kwa majina naitwa Lucy Wamboi Lesea, ni mkaaji wa Namanga, naishi katika maeneo ya msikiti wa Mola Namanga. Ni mama ambaye niko na watoto 2 wangu wa kuzaa na niko na watoto wengine 4 ambaye ni yatima na lea. Wananitegemea mimi kwa kila kitu, masomo, kula na kuvaa. Lakini katika muda fulani nimepata ugonjwa ambaye ni uvimbe ulioko mgongoni mwangu, na umekuwa ukiniadhiri kiasi kwamba nashindwa kuwalea wale watoto na ile njia inafaa, na hawana mlezi mwingine isipokuwa mimi. Uvimbe huu uko mgongoni umeniadhiri kiasi kwamba siwezi hata nikafanya biashara zangu, na hata siwezi nikafanya kazi, kwa sababu nikijaribu kufanya kazi ambaye ni mzito, ule mkono unaganda, unanibidi niende hospitali. Nimeenda hospitali, for example kama Kajiado, lakini bado sijapata pesa ya nifanyie operation, kwa sababu inatakana gharama kubwa na sina. So mimi mkono huu ningepata venye nitasaidika, nipate kutolewa uvimbe uko hapo kwa mkono ambao ni mkono wangu wa kulia kwa mgongo, ningekuwa nitarudia kwa hadhi yangu ya kawaida. Mimi ni mtu najua kufanya kazi, niko na biashara zangu ambazo zimesimama. For example, nilikuwa napika mandazi, nimeshindwa kupika kwa sababu ni kazi inahitaji nguvu nyingi na mkono unakataa kufanya kazi. Leo nafurahi, nimekuja hospitalini na nimeenda kwa line, nimepata namba na naelekea kwenda kumuona daktari. Natumai nitapata matibabu na nafurahia kwa kuwa najua nitakuwa huru, kwa kuwa nimekuwa kama mfungwa kwa siku nyingi. Nimekuwa nikijificha. Natumai leo ndio siku yangu ya kuwa huru na nitapata uponyaji.
It was a big huge lump, around 1 kilogram, big tumor on the back of this lady. How many years you suffer like this?
10 years.
10 years, imagine. She is holding this tumor, and I'm sure she might not go another 5-10 years. She can remain like this. The risk factor for this type of lumps, it can convert it in malignancy, in the cancer, and the patient can die.
Nimetolewa, uvimbe ulikuwa mgongoni, na kweli nashukuru Mungu kwa kuwa kweli nimetolewa, na sasa nitafanya kazi zangu ambazo sikuwa naweza kufanya. Sijalipa hata shilingi, hakuna kitu nimeitishwa, nimefanyiwa bure, kutoka kuchukuliwa pressure, vipimo vyote, mpaka kwenda operation room nimefanyiwa bure. Na nashukuru kwa ushirikiano wa madaktari, kwa kweli walikuwa I'm happy, I'm so happy.
The services which we are providing absolutely free in this medical camp are dental, gynecology, and minor surgeries. And we thank Allah, alhamdulillah, lots of people have benefited from this free medical camp, and we thank one and all who have made it possible for this medical camp to be successful.
What a beautiful report. Now that story brings us to the end of our first part of the show. We're going to go on a short break, but we're coming back with a discussion all about the social dimensions of climate change. I've got an all-stars lineup of people to lead the conversation, but do not go anywhere. We're coming back on a very short break.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation. Verse of the day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما. والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما.
Uislamu ni dini yenye mpangilio ulio kamili na taratibu zake humpa fursa kila mja kuifahamu na kuelewa.
Muislamu yoyote lazima achukue jukumu la kuifahamu dini yake, kuanzia kwenye shahada, ashhadu, nakiri kwa moyo,
kisha usafi wa kimwili.
Hapo ndipo huanza safari ya kumwabudu Mola wake.
Usikose kujiunga nasi kila siku ya Jumamosi live kwenye kipindi Ufahamu Uislamu, ili ujifunze mengi usiyojua kutoka Horizon TV.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون.
Enyi mlioamini, munapoitwa kuhudhuria swala ya Ijumaa, fanyeni haraka kuikimbilia, muache biashara zenu, hilo ni bora ikiwa mwelewa.
Isikilizeni kwa umakinifu khutba ya Ijumaa
ili uzidi kujenga imani yako na kupata faida nyingi ya siku hii.
Coming to you every Friday from Jamia Mosque, Nairobi.
Live on Horizon TV.
Kuna faida gani twapata tukimjua Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
nabii mwenye ushawishi mkubwa duniani?
Tukizikwa tukitiwa kaburini, tutaulizwa haya maswali matatu: man rabbuk, ma dinuk, man nabiyuk.
Sheikh Jamaluddin anakupa simulizi.
Huwezi kumpenda mtu usiyemjua
na kutambua sunna zake,
lakini ukimjua na ukimtambua Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mapenzi yako yatazidi.
Ufahamu Rasulullah, familia na maswahaba wake. Tazama sira ya Mtume kila Jumatatu saa 1 jioni kwenye Horizon TV.
Oh
On the next episode.
Wewe kwa nyumba yako unavuruga mke wako kisha waje wapatiana. Sasa zingine yake kuna vitu ambazo kwamba hazieleweki Sheikh. Kuna baadhi ya semina ambazo kwamba zinaandaliago nowadays ama symposium. Wakuta mtu anakuja kuzungumzia mambo marriage, mambo ya ndoa. Yeye mwenyewe ameacha kaa wawili watatu.
On the next episode.
Wewe kwa nyumba yako unavuruga mke wako kisha waje wapatiana. Sasa zingine yake kuna vitu ambazo kwamba hazieleweki Sheikh. Kuna baadhi ya semina ambazo kwamba zinaandaliago nowadays ama symposium. Wakuta mtu anakuja kuzungumzia mambo marriage, mambo ya ndoa. Yeye mwenyewe ameacha kaa wawili watatu. Pengine mmemtafuta mwingine ambaye kwamba mwanamke anakuja kuzungumzisha watu mambo ya ndoa, ameacho tayari, yeye ni mutlaka, ameacho iko nje ya ndoa kabisa, hana mume. Kesho waje wazungumzisha watu kuhusu namna ya kuishi vizuri na wake zenyu, namna kuishi na waume zenyu vizuri. Wewe mwenyewe umewacha Sheikh.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Thank you so much for staying with us here on Horizon TV, and we are back while we unravel the social dimensions of climate change. I'm not alone in studio. Joining me is Phoebe Shikuku, the Regional Coordinator, Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Action from the IFRC. Hi Phoebe.
Hi Nadia, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
Good morning to you too.
I know it's been a very busy week for Kenya and Africa in general. And also joining me in the studio is Mr. Peter Murgo, the Disaster Risk Reduction Manager from the Kenya Red Cross. How are you, Peter?
Fine, thank you, Nadia. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Ahmed Bashir, the CEO of the Kesho Alliance. How are you, Ahmed?
Thank you so much. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. It's very interesting because I wanted representatives from different areas. I have IFRC here who deals with Africa in general, and then I have Kenya Red Cross who are handling the Kenyan matters, and then I have a youth representative who will be giving us from his point of view. And just for anyone who's been listening, it's been a very busy week. It's been a week that Africa and Kenya in general all eyes have been on us this week, and it's all about climate change. And it's very nice because as I was listening to a clip where President William Ruto was speaking, and he was saying we might not be the ones who are causing it, but we are definitely the ones who are suffering the most. And I know this is a question for Phoebe. For anyone who's listening, for the ordinary Mwananchi who's been listening to this, they try to grasp the idea, what is climate change? And I think you are best to answer that.
Thank you so much, Nadia, and thank you so much for having us here in your studios. I think I'll just define climate change in the simplest of ways, something that my grandmother can understand.
Yeah.
When you talk about climate change, you're looking at the changes in key weather parameters. Looking at temperature, it's more hotter than it was a few years back. Looking at rainfall, it's starting later than it used to start.
Yes.
It's stopping later than it used to stop. It's raining more in an area where it was not raining as much, or it's becoming dry in an area where usually they used to have very good rainfall. So looking at climate change, we're looking at, for example, the changes in temperature, the changes in the rainfall patterns, the changes in the pests and diseases that are affecting an area.
Yes.
In my area, I was not getting desert locust, but now we are having desert locust infestation. In simple language, that's what I would say when you look at climate change you're talking about. Thank you.
Very, very good. I think that clearly cuts it off and said you've said it in the most simplest way that you've said your grandmother would probably understand. And this is a question for Peter. From Kenya Red Cross, you guys have been assisting on the ground. You know how it is on the ground. As she's mentioned, if it's raining heavily. And as Kenya, we've come out of a period of the worst drought in decades. People have, I don't know if people have lost lives, you can tell us that, but we've seen people lose their livelihoods, their livestock, they're not able to plant, there's extreme hunger in the country and also in the African region. How do you explain to somebody who's listening, they say, oh, my goats died. You know, I've not been able to probably farm as better as I used to, and this is all due to climate change. How bad is it on the ground?
Nadia, you know, you've really underscored it well, yeah, and it's one thing to want to support people to withstand a shock.
Yeah.
It's another thing if the shock is protracted. You know, if a shock, you could go in and just help people for a season and you know that they'll bounce back.
Yes.
And it will get better. But now when you're expecting it to bounce back, it goes on for almost 5-6 seasons, then that is devastation.
Yes.
So you find that depleted water sources, you find that even which were buffer water sources, for example, they get drained over time. You find that the livelihoods, whereas you would have given somebody hope to tell you, we will support you now, and in the next season, probably you will get back to your livelihoods. Then when that season, they're trying to use the little they had, still there are no rains. So you find series of exacerbated food insecurity.
Yes.
You find now epidemics that are coming in related to what Phoebe just mentioned, because initially you're not looking at certain kind of diseases, now you're finding those diseases. So what you start seeing on the ground is compounded needs.
Yes.
Food insecurity, you find there are diseases, you start finding there's conflict, you start now realizing even there are mental issues.
Yes.
Yeah, so that is what we are seeing on the ground. And eventually what that does to an institution like Kenya Red Cross and our partners like IFRC is now stretched resources, because whereas you had resources to support people over a certain time and then they can bounce back to their normal livelihoods, it's not there anymore. If there was some resilience activities that had been done, if there were some developmental actions that had taken place before, right now they've been totally destroyed. So we are getting into a scenario whereby we are all asking ourselves, how then do we help these communities to cope?
Yes.
But it's a bad scenario. People, if they were walking now 5-7 kilometers, then they would walk 50 kilometers to access water. It's now increasing even to almost 70 kilometers because the water sources are getting stretched further and further away.
Before I get back to you, because you've mentioned about resources with partners like IFRC, you're being stretched to the limit. And just before I get back to you, I want to talk to Ahmed about the youth. How is it important, as you're listening to the conversation, and they're pointing out issues that I feel like people should constantly be reminded. It's not, we shouldn't wait for something extremely bad to happen and we start saying, oh, climate change, you know, people are losing their livelihoods and all that. How important is it that the youth, you're sitting here and you're listening to the conversation, how important is it that young people are invited to the table?
The thing is that young people actually form the most population of Kenya today, and we form around 80%, if not 73%, I'm not sure. And leaving that bulk population out of whole conversation about climate change, that means that the solution themselves will not be effective. Because when we talk about mitigation, you need to bring people from all crossing lines. You need to bring women, you need to bring children, you need to bring young people, and so you're missing out on a whole percentage of the population, and that means you're missing a whole pillar of ours, and the sustainability itself will lose it will go away. So my idea, my take in this, Nadia, is that involvement of young people, and if we keep them at part, if we involve them talkingly, that means that we're not having the real conversation. But if we have them on board and we include them powerfully, like we empower them, because when you look at how young people have been involved in very many aspects when it comes to climate change, when it comes to governance, we are involving them as if we are doing them a favor. Or maybe we're just doing a welfare. So that's not the kind of involvement that young people want today. It's the involvement that we are telling young people that we want you in this space because you have the knowledge, you have the skills to give it to us.
Yes, and just to I can see Phoebe wants to add on that.
I just wanted to compliment what he says.
Yes.
When you look at the youth, as President Ruto said, the youth have potential in terms of their energy, in terms of the knowledge and skills, as he has put it.
Yes.
But also when you look at the youth, they form the majority of the Africa's population, not only Africa, the Kenyan as a country, but also in terms of the African population. Secondly, the other point that I want to make is like when you look at the youth and technology, they are very much ahead in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, which is key and very necessary when you're looking at finding solutions to the climate, to the impacts that climate change is bringing.
Yes.
So the youth are potential, they have the knowledge, they have the innovation in them, they are very dynamic, very flexible in terms of finding solutions to the different challenges that climate change has brought into this country.
It's for Peter. Do you share the same sentiments? Does Kenya Red Cross share the same sentiments?
Absolutely, Nadia. In fact, we have a youth department.
Yes.
And we have a youth manager, for that matter, for climate change and adaptation.
Wonderful.
That's how better could it get.
Yeah,
I mean, we are realistic to the fact that for two reasons, in fact. Number one, not only them being a large population, so to speak, and having innovation, but secondly, if we are to build resilience, if we are to address these issues, who are the leaders of the future, as they would say it? It's this youth. Who are going to have that influence and bring change in the community level? It's the youth. So yes, Kenya Red Cross believes and agrees with that, and not only just thinks about it, does it. By having the youth be at the forefront. Even the community conversations, our volunteers, our implementers at the ground level, we have what we call the out of school, we have in school, and in school we even have debates and discussions around environmental conservation. We have a tree planting initiative to green our environment, and in this tree planting initiative, it is school children who are leading these conversations. It is youths who are leading these discussions. So, and then even at the community level, the community managed disaster risk reduction groups that are looking at environmental issues. Again, youth on the driving seat. So we are on that table.
As a youth myself, I think I'm loving this conversation. And or still on you, Peter, we've had countries and different representatives. We've seen money being given out to Kenya, you know, and African countries to help them fight climate change. I know as Kenya Red Cross, as IFRC, you guys work closely with governments, you know. How important is it that now you go back and there's a better partnership with various governments to assist you as well in helping them?
And again, that's a very good point. And even when we look at this Africa Climate Summit and the conversations that are happening, one of the things that we want to appreciate amongst the myriads and the divergent views here, one thing we want to appreciate is the political goodwill.
Yes.
Because you see, if you don't have that political environment, if you don't have that political buy-in, whichever way it goes, if you don't have it, it's difficult to operate. So the first thing we want to appreciate is the political goodwill, the political buy-in, and the government being on the driving seat of this conversation.
Yes.
That is the first good starting point. So the second bit of how that helps our work is all down from the top level to the ground level. If we start at the head of state himself, if we go to the Ministry of Environment and Climate, if we go to now even the county level, the departments of disaster management, if we go at the community level, the conversations are already happening. So that makes it very easy for us to plug in and to start doing and even enhancing, because we're already doing it, and enhancing environmental conservation practices, enhancing climate change and adaptation. For example, climate smart agriculture, which are some of the things that we're already doing towards boosting community resilience, taking into account the impacts of climate change. And then also resource allocation. You know, if government is on the table, if you are to discuss resource allocation and the need to prioritize issues around climate change, then it becomes very easy and swift. So this is very pertinent for us. We are holding it to the heart.
Yes.
We would like to be very clear that we are not saying that we are there yet. We are not saying that everything has been addressed. And we can't, there's no silver bullet to say with this one conference we can address everything, for example. But the fact that we are at this starting point where we can have discussions and we can appreciate that there is need for resources to be allocated,
Yes.
that we need to prioritize and incentivize actions that will promote environmental conservation and things that address climate change, that's a good place we are in.
Very, very good. And just Phoebe, before you add on that, just add on it and then I'll probably ask you my question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Peter has said. When we look at sustainability, we cannot, as for example, the Kenya Red Cross or the IFRC talk of sustainability. Sustainability lies with the government. And for example, when you look at the non-governmental organizations, they will live after the project, but government will forever be there with the communities beyond the project. And for us as the Red Cross, we always say that projects cannot build resilience. We have to look at scaling up those projects so that they'll be there beyond that partner, they'll be there and continue to build the capacity of the communities. Working with the government, as Peter has said, there'll be the issue of sustainability. When we work with the government, we know that whatever we have done would go beyond us. Also, as he has mentioned, resource allocation, quite important.
Yes.
When you talk about resilience, we are not talking about 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. We're talking about 3, 4, 5, 10 years. We need resources to be allocated to that. The other point that I wanted to mention, working with the government enables for community to be engaged and involved at all times. When we have the community voices brought in from the beginning, in the designing, in the co-implementation, in getting the lessons learned, we see that we are able to support the communities to build their resilience. As IFRC, we say that resilience is not a gift. We have to work with our communities, support them in building this resilience, so that when we get the next heavy rainfall, they will not wait for the government to give them handovers. Rather, they'll be able to start water harvesting, they'll be able to start clearing the drainage so that we do not get any kind of flash flooding happening in that region. They'll be able to run things, they'll take leadership, community leadership, they will ensure that this thing is focused on us, it's about us, so let's take it and own it as the community.
Very, very good. And just before I get back to you, I have a very burning question, but I want to listen to what Ahmed has to say.
I just have something, because yesterday we had a conversation with IOM about the Kampala Declaration on climate-induced migration. And recently we had another meeting 1 week ago in Nairobi, just to make it continental so that it can be adopted by other African countries.
Just sorry to cut you short, Ahmed. I'm being notified the mic is having a little bit of technical issues, but we're coming back to you to continue on the Kampala Declaration. Just a quick question for Phoebe. When we're talking about fund allocations and we're talking about governments that have now decided, you know what, we are going to be at the forefront of climate change, to make let's say a country that probably wonders, we've got so many issues before we reach climate issue as a main agenda. We've got poverty, you know, people are hungry. There's a lot of unemployment in different countries, right? I feel like we have a common issues throughout the borders, right? So before I sit down, and also insecurity, we've seen some of the African countries are having a little bit of insecurity issues. We're seeing Sudan as a good example. Before Sudan comes to the table and decides climate action, what could you, how do we tell them that some of these issues can be solved if we tackle climate change?
Thank you so much, Nadia. I'll begin with one point that says resilience is freedom. When we are able to support our communities to be resilient, I will not have to fight with my neighbor for resources. I will not have to migrate from my country to another country in search of greener pastures. We might not run away from response work. It will be there with us for a very long time. But it's high time that as governments, we think about, as much as you're committing funds to tackling issues to do with, all those emergencies, that we also have an equal or even more investment directed towards preparedness, directed towards resilience building. When I'm able to prepare, I'm able to anticipate for a flood that's coming. I'm able to prepare for it in terms of looking at 1 option, 2 option, 3 option, and that's why I say resilience brings freedom. I'm able to work as a government, plan in good enough time in terms of, I know in March, April, May, it's the Kenya long rain season, we are likely to get flooding in part A of the country. I'm able to plan for it, I'm able to prepare for it, I'm able to anticipate for it. But also when it comes to resilience building, we are not running away from the fact that A few times we might have disasters happening, but we have contingency fund as a government to be able to support our communities to bounce back from the effects of that disaster, but bounce back in a resilient manner.
Yes.
So one, it's just the acknowledgement that response will be there in one way or the other, but also ensuring that we have equal resource allocation, if more, for resilience building. A lot of research has been done, and it shows that when we are able to invest in resilience building, we are able to give communities dignity, because they are able to save their lives, they are able to save their livelihoods, and in the longer term, it reduces the overall cost of response, because governments have been able to invest in preparedness as well as resilience building. And that's what as the Red Cross we invest quite a lot. If we look at our strategy, the IFRC 2030 strategy, we are looking at 3 things: supporting communities to be able to anticipate, prepare and respond to these disasters. We are looking at supporting communities in terms of their health and well-being, they're able to thrive in their lives, and then also looking and addressing the root causes of migration. If I'm able to support community member to diversify their livelihood, I don't have to cross oceans to go and look for greener pastures when I can be able to thrive in my community where I am.
Very, very good. And I see, Ahmed, now we are sorted. Sorry for that. You were talking about the Kampala Declaration, and I can see you holding a road mic now.
Yeah, it's just about the political goodwill that my brother was talking about. Is that yesterday we had a meeting with IAM. It was about the Kampala Declaration being adopted by other African countries. And my question there was, and yeah, we do have declarations. We have the recent one which the President launched, which is called the Nairobi Declaration. But I mean, are the member states also willing to budget for those, or are they waiting for external organizations to invest? Are they waiting for maybe the other UN entities to come on board, or are they also going to incorporate the declarations into the budget and then budget for that? Because that's how we can say these declarations are sustainable, and even after other governments and other generation come, they still have funding for those. And that's why I saw my brother's thing about political goodwill as something that we really need when it comes to implementation of these declarations.
Very, very important. I think, Peter, would you like to add on something?
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand declarations to be such.
Yes.
They're declarations. It's an indication of intent.
Yes. But actions speak louder than words.
So I think sometimes the problem comes in when we expect a certain phase of an activity to address the issues. But I think if we understand that a declaration is first of all declaring the intent, that we are emphasizing commitment to get this direction, it creates the avenue, in my view, for now the actors to leverage on that. You see, like, it's very easy for us to pick, if we were to go back to government and say, but there's this declaration, remember. This declaration says we are committed to, for example, policy. I saw issues around policy there. So this declaration binds us to have policy issues that will enforce certain things, number one. Number two, this declaration enables us now to say, we have said we're going to prioritize 1, 2, 3 around climate change. So how do we use the declarations to unlock or to activate some of the things? So for me, I want to look at the declarations as receipts. Well, how can I'm looking for a better term to say, as drivers, you see?
Yes.
As drivers and as tools that can now enable us to unlock and to action some of the things we intend.
Yes.
And that's why I go back and I agree with you that political goodwill is one thing, enacting and putting into action those goodwills to realize now, because otherwise we will move from one declaration to another without realizing much.
Yes.
I think also my challenge to our partners as humanitarian actors, NGOs, CSOs, people like myself, is how then do we take advantage of such declarations? How do we take advantage of different components of the declarations, hold on to them, run with them, engage government, hold them accountable, try to now work together to bring solutions. If there are gaps, how then do we come back and say, yes, there was this declaration, it was very good, but realize it only takes us here, there's this gap, how then do we address this gap?
Very, very true.
So that's how I'd look at it.
Yeah. Can I just compliment
what
my colleague Peter said? I think for me, looking at what the African Climate Summit did and the issue of the declaration coming, for me it was like a meditation time. it was able to give us the clarity as well as the tools, or what he said, the drivers of what we need to do. And moving forward, we really need actions that will solidify that change. If you're not able to act, at the end of the day, it was good speak, it was good talk.
It was nice.
It was nice talk, you know, it was nice taking all the photos.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, my grandmother will continue to suffer.
Yeah.
My grandmother will have to walk 10 more kilometers to get water.
Yes.
My grandmother would have to, you know, go and sell the little maize that she has to be able to feed her two, you know, grandchildren or something like that. My sister would have to walk 10 kilometers, which predisposes her to issues of gender, you know, sexual exploitation, gender abuse, sexual abuse, and all those kind of stuff. But if we act, it's able to change the life of my grandmother back in the village. It's able to provide my sister the option of going to school rather than going or staying back in the village, to be able to get food to fend for the family. So action.
Action.
For us as
Speak
the
louder
Red
than
Cross, I
words.
think it will speak louder than all the words that were
Yes,
mentioned.
and for Ahmed, I have two questions for you. The first one is, you run the Kesho Alliance. What projects have you gotten the Kesho Alliance involved in that are all about climate change and climate action?
So we don't, as an organization, we don't really work directly on climate change, but we work at the intersections. For instance, our main target, our main work is on education. And one of the things is we work in pastoralist communities, and most of the time when they move with their kids because of the climate impact, the children's education are affected. And therefore we have we had a project with the Ministry of Education where we were doing boarding schools, and then we were also training parents, the pupils' parents, on how they can do smart agriculture, and then we create markets for that. And then we also did, we created a hive for them. Each parent had a one hive that can create employment for it. So also the project itself was creating behavioral change. These people being pastoralist communities, we are teaching them how to do farming, we are teaching them how to do smart agriculture, and also their children have the opportunity to be in school. And with a period of 1 year, we saw even the children's performance increasing, because the school itself became the first one in Garissa. And that itself showed us that if we actually focus on climate change, now we can also have quality education.
As you were speaking, I'm getting out one of the areas that are affected also with climate change is the education sector. And just to talk about the education sector, IFRC is here. The Kenya Red Cross is here. They've mentioned also partnering up with schools, as Peter had mentioned. What do you think the Kesho Alliance can do more for the community in general, especially with educating children about climate change and climate action?
I think it's to push on policies that make it mandatory that people learn about climate change, as much as because almost the population today, according to the UN, is at almost 2 billion pupils. And if we teach these people about sustainability, that means when they're graduating, a number of champions, a number of sustainability champions are graduating, and they'll be conscious about the environment. And also the other thing is that schools themselves should have the responsibility that any student that's going out, and any activity that the student is doing or any activity that they are doing should be conscious about the surrounding environment. And that's something I should say international organizations have a role to play in that.
Yes.
Can I just compliment what my colleague has said?
Yes.
And I'll use examples from the rest of the countries. So as my colleague Peter mentioned, as the Red Cross Red Crescent, we focus quite a lot on school-based disaster risk reduction. So working with school children, working with their teachers in terms of supporting them to know what disaster risk reduction is, climate change adaptation is, and what they can do at their level to be able to not only mitigate the climate change itself, but also the impacts that come with it. In Mauritius, for example, through the support of the Mauritian Red Cross Society, we have been able to ensure that climate change is part of the school curriculum. And so every child that goes to school has to be taught about what is climate change, what are the impacts of climate change, what can I do in my capacity to be able to mitigate the impacts of climate change, as well as also adapt to the impact itself. So the Mauritian Red Cross Society has supported the advocated for the inclusion of climate change within the school curriculum. And I think that's what most countries in Africa should actually borrow and replicate. Secondly, the Mauritian Red Cross Society has actually provided tools to the schools to be able to teach children what climate change is and what they can do about it. So let me give a very good example. We all know about snakes and ladder, right?
Yes.
From our primary school.
Yes.
I'm sure you know, the back of your school book, there was
We
the snake and ladder, and we
Yes.
played it. So they have actually utilized the snakes and ladder to teach children about risk reduction and climate change adaptation. So if they ask a question, you know, they have produced cards and they ask you a question, do you know what climate change is? If you're able to explain what climate change is, then you move a few steps up the ladder. If you don't know what climate change is, then you move a few steps down the ladder.
Yes.
And that way, children are able to learn and, you know, be interested to learn about what climate change is. And they actually demonstrate it. Secondly, they have been able to include children in simulations, in drills, so that children know what they need to do when a certain aspect happens. For example, in small island states, they get affected by cyclones. When you get the warning, the cyclone warning, how do you go into the underground, you know, safety areas? How do you evacuate? How do you protect your house or your shelter from the effects of climate change? So a lot of advocacy, as you said, in terms of including climate change in school curriculum, partners supporting the government in terms of providing tools that would enable the children to learn, bring it down to their level, contextualize it to their level. It's cyclones that affect me, bring a game around cyclones. Bring school competitions, as my colleague Peter was talking about, and we do that as the Red Cross quite a lot. Today is the World First Aid Day, and Kenya Red Cross is having a competition on that. So if you have not participated, you're welcome to participate in that. So school competitions through the school environmental clubs that really support school-going children to really understand what is climate change adaptation and what should I do from my level. What is that small contribution that I can make to make the world a better place?
Very impressive. I love how you even included a game in it. And just for the Ministry of Education, if the next step is bringing the curriculum to also handle climate change, are you willing, as the Kesho Alliance, as the Kenya Red Cross, as IFRC, are you willing to partner with the Ministry of Education if they reached out to you?
In fact, I think maybe, Nadia, if I may domesticate that point.
Yes.
I think the question even is not if we are willing.
Yeah.
We are already there.
Already doing it.
Oh, wonderful.
They're already, like I talked, I know the time has not allowed us really to unpack.
Yes.
When people hear Red Cross or Kenya Red Cross, they just think of the accidents and the first aid.
Yes.
But there is a lot of activities that we do, a lot of developmental activities that we do. The unit that I head, the Disaster Risk Reduction Unit, is more about developmental work at the community level, engaging communities during normal times. And one such activities, about when I was talking about greening environments, is urban risk reduction, and then also school programs. Under our youth department, they have what we're calling the 4-part youth program, and one of them is just working in school programs. So in the school programs, you remember the way you used to have debating clubs and all those kind of things? So there are clubs. There are clubs in the school, Red Cross clubs, and some of those is conserving the environment. So, and there is even more increased efforts to work with the Ministry of Education to see that how do we make our curriculum take more in terms of having discussions around climate change. There's the Swahili saying that mtoto mleavyo ndivyo akuavyo. You see, I remember some things from the Moi days because we were young that time, and remember we were being put in the wildlife club to really plant trees and to do all that. So it's not if we are willing, we already are doing that. These are some of the things that Red Cross is doing quietly, the Kenya Red Cross for that matter, is doing with the Ministry of Education, is doing with schools. We have a lot, and even in the future, in about 2 weeks' time, when we're having a Pan-African conference, you'll be seeing even one of the initiatives, a tree planting initiative that we are doing and launching, and we're doing it also in partnership with schools, just along that. So there's that conversation that is already ongoing.
Yes, I know, Phoebe was very excited.
So just to compliment my brother, Peter, when you talk about partnerships and collaborations, as the Red Cross, we are very open to partnerships and collaboration. And as you said, we're already doing it, and we're looking forward to more partnerships and collaboration. What stood out for me at the African Climate Summit is when the President said, we cannot do this alone.
It is true.
We need partners, we need collaborators. Of course, we need to be equal partners and equal collaborators in that collaborations and partnership. And as the IFRC, which we are, you know, a secretariat to the Red Cross and Red Crescent national societies globally, with a membership of 192, we have what we call the Pan-African initiatives. And these Pan-African initiatives, we have initiated them to be able to solve the key challenges that are affecting Africa. And when you look at the key challenges that are affecting Africa, it's either too much water or too little water. So there's food security, and under food security we have the initiative of Zero Hunger to be able to address the impacts of climate change when you look at the issues of food security. And then we have the tree planting and care, which my colleague has talked about. And here we are looking at how do we support to the efforts of the government in terms of climate change mitigation, as well as also climate change adaptation. And then we have the third initiative, we have called it the Red Ready. How do we support our communities to be able to anticipate, prepare, respond, and recover resiliently from the different impacts or disasters that happen. And what, or why I say this is, like all these initiatives, we cannot do it alone as the Red Cross. We do quite a lot beyond, as my colleague has said, you know, the ambulance services, beyond being the first responders on the ground when an incident happens. We have a lot of development initiatives, but we cannot do everything. We cannot support probably all the 47 counties in Kenya. We need to work with we need to work with private partners. We need to work with also the public partners to be able to move this agenda forward. And so when you talk about partnerships, when you talk about collaboration, as the Red Cross, you're open. As I talked about Mauritius Red Cross, they partnered with the government. They supported the government to be able to advocate and put a little resources to ensure that that curriculum is developed that would support or ensure climate change is there. And after the curriculum was supported, like there's also the whole idea of going to, you know, the legislative arm of government to ensure that it's passed, a bill that's passed. Through our disaster law program, that's the work we do. We support in ensuring that we support our governments in terms of policies, frameworks, and legislation that would make or create an enabling environment for issues of climate change adaptation as well as disaster risk reduction to
Beautiful.
move
And
forward.
just before we wrap it up, I want to hear from Ahmed about the Kesho Alliance, and also if anyone reached out to you, if IFRC reached out to you, if the Kenya Red Cross reached out to the Kesho Alliance, would you be willing to partner with such organizations?
Oh, okay. Before I answer the question, Nadia,
Yes.
I would just something just came up when she was speaking about public-private partnership, and if there's something we haven't really spoken about is the role private sector plays in climate change, and we see a lot of companies who are involved in production of things that are very, I could say, putting climate at risk. And it's high time that international organizations like Red Cross and IFRC come on board and holding these private sectors accountable on what they do. And also in their, it's not always about doing something that makes the community at risk, but, and then later on give something as a CSR just to cover all the things that you've done. But it's time we hold them accountable and tell them that anything you produce, if it's a risk to the climate, you have to stop it, or you have to, this is the amount of thing you have to do to cover all the things. And it's high time that we as CSOs and also international organizations stand together in collaboration and hold these people accountable. And of course, if you guys reached out to us, we would be so happy to partner with you. We are open to partnership, and we work in arid and semi-arid land areas in Kenya, and those are the most affected by climate change, and they're also the most misinformed when it comes to climate change, because when I go to my community, they don't know anything about mitigation or adaptation. I have to tell them in a language that they understand. And also there's a lot of work that we need to do when it comes to localization and ownership of everything that's happening around when it comes to climate change. And I think partners like you are open to partner with us to come on board and educate people on climate change and how they can be climate conscious.
I love this whole discussion. I feel like, as a young person as well, we are involved with the IFRC. I can hear the Kenya Red Cross is ready to assist and is working with young people. And also the Kesha Alliance, because as you've mentioned, Ahmed, you're willing to sit down with anyone. I love his bold statement about holding the people who are harming the environment accountable. It's not about at the end of the year you do a little CSR and give back to the community and say, okay, that equals the wrong that we've done. There should be held accountable and there should be penalties. As we wrap up the show, any final remarks that you guys would love to add? Peter.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, indeed. It's just good that we are in this conversation space.
Yes.
And it is just important for all of us to understand that climate change is real. Climate change is here. I hope you saw in the morning when you woke up. Yesterday was very hot.
Yes.
You saw how it was this morning. You wouldn't expect that it would be that chilly and cold. That's how real climate change is here. It is our responsibility from all the corners we sit, every position you hold, to be part of this conversation, to play a role in supporting initiatives and actions aimed towards limiting the effects of climate change, so that we can have a better environment, a better community. And it will be good if we can all work together from all the corners to make sure that we preserve our environment, to make sure that we adapt to climate change, and to see how we can become resilient.
Yes. What about you, Phoebe?
Yeah, I think my parting shot is what I said earlier, looking at the climate summit and what a lot of people are doing. For a long time we have meditated, which is good enough. We have the clarity, we have the tools, but moving forward we need action that will solidify that change. And finally, I would want to say that when we are able to make our communities resilient, we are able to give them the freedom, we are able to give them the hope, we are able to give them dignified life. As the Red Cross, we are there for hope, we are there to ensure that communities live a dignified life and they thrive.
Yes. What about you, Ahmed?
Just reflecting on the whole week about the climate summit and now the climate week coming to an end today, and my hope is really just the culture of giving handouts, cash transfers to people and in ASAL areas, because there's that culture of I really feel like people don't need relief, they need the skills that will be sustainable. They need skills to be trained to be farmers, to be trained to be sustainable, to be trained so that the handouts you give them, imagine you're giving them handouts today and that means they'll use it for something else, and then the next month they'll also need a handout. But if you give them skills on how to do smart agriculture, they'll create employment for other people, they'll also be independent by themselves. So for me the whole week is the normal culture of adapting to climate adaptation and mitigation is not the culture way that we are used to in ASAL areas, but new ways and innovative ways, and that is also by working with young minds and also people from all crossing lines.
Thank you so much, and I think that wraps up the show. Thank you so much for setting aside your time. You know, you probably had busy schedules, but you were kind enough and gracious to join me for this conversation. And the conversation does not end here. It's up to us all. We cannot, as you've mentioned, do it alone. And climate change is real, and it is here, and we are seeing the effects, as you've mentioned. Yesterday was extremely hot, and it started raining probably at the end of the day, and today morning it's extremely cold in the morning. So that clearly tells us that we are seeing the effects as we go on our day-to-day activities. Thank you so much once again for joining me for this conversation, and to everybody who's watching, thank you so much for staying with us here on Horizon TV. Let's remember, first it's about being clean and it's about being green. It's about conserving the environment, and it's also about actions speaking louder than words. Once again, thank you so much, and that brings us to the end of today's show. Join me again next Friday. Until then, goodbye.